Welcome into the Commanders Report live show. I am your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on a beautiful Wednesday evening to talk some Commanders football before this football team plays a very important game on Monday Night Football this week versus the Kansas City Chiefs. We got a bunch of great stuff lined up for you guys on today's live show. First up, the latest Commanders news and rumors. All right, so everything from a Jayden Daniels injury update to the latest trade buzz and intel surrounding the Washington Commanders. Then we'll get into some Commanders trade candidates. I've got a number of players here on the Commanders that if they want to sell at the deadline and get some extra draft picks for next year, they can do that. We'll go over some of those names in our second segment, and then I'll take your questions on the weekly mailbag here on the Commanders Reports. If you have a question that you want to ask on this week's live show, make sure you guys use hashtag Commanders down there in the live chat room. The real ones know what to do. You put hashtag Commanders down there in the live chat, and in that same comment, you put your question in after that. So, for example, you put hashtag Commanders, can the Washington Commanders beat the Kansas City Chiefs this week, or whatever your question is, all right? And if you put that in there, producer Ponzi is going to be able to see your question, and he'll get it into the mailbag here today. Speaking of Ponzi, how are we doing here on a Wednesday? Do you have any hope left for this Commanders team? Because it certainly seems like after that terrible performance versus the Dallas Cowboys, after giving away that Monday Night Football game to the Chicago Bears, and you're sitting at 3-4, there's a lot of doom and gloom here in Commanders Nation right now. Do you share that sentiment at this point?
Not at this moment, no. I do believe that this team does have a lot of issues to figure it out. I think that, Jayden Daniels certainly being out, if you haven't seen the news already, for Monday Night Football, that's certainly a bad thing. But I will say this. I think Marucs Mariota can lead the ship, and I don't think this will be a long-term injury for Jayden Daniels. But it's got to change and fast. But, we're sitting at the mark, and it's kind of one of those things where this is one of the defining moments of a team where you have a, now 3-4 or 3-3?
3-4.
3-4 record. And, it's one of those marks where you can easily turn your season around at this point, but also it's too early to tell if this season's just done. Because especially in the NFC East, who knows, the Eagles could collapse again. The Cowboys could also have a late season collapse again as well. So I think that as long as the Commanders can man the float and, make some changes, get some adjustments out, I think there is some hope. Not a lot, but some.
Yeah, I would say that they've got a lot of stuff to figure out on the defensive side of the ball. And we put out a full, extensive plan of 8 things that I would do to try and help to fix this Commanders defense. And a lot of that plan, Ponzi, is about playing faster and getting the slow players off the field. Marshawn Lattimore and Bobby Wagner, all right? Putting Frankie Louvu at edge rusher. I think that would kind of accentuate what he does well as, he's a great blitzing linebacker, but he's not very good out in space as a tackler, and he's not particularly good in pass coverage. So just take away those 2 elements of his game and put him at the line of scrimmage. That would be my prescription for Frankie Louvu, and I still think he can be an effective player in that way. But then, you got to get better in the secondary. Quan Martin has been a disaster. I think you have to think about sitting him down. Mike Samerstill has been really bad in the nickel. I would probably want to put him on the outside if you're going to move on from Lattimore. But it seems like this team is not willing to do any of those things at this point. So until they make those changes, I have to think that things are not going to get better on the Commanders' defense, especially this week going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And as much as I think Marucs Mariota, can play some good football if he's got the right supporting cast around him, that defense is going to be giving up a lot of points. Mariota's going to be asked to carry a lot of the load and win a shootout versus probably Patrick Mahomes this week on the road and at Arrowhead. It's going to be a tough one to win this week, Ponzi. And if you're sitting at 3-5, it's going to be tough sledding. I'm just going to put it that way because you probably have to get to at least 10 wins to make the playoffs this year. If you lose this week, you can only afford 2 more losses the rest of the season, and that's just to get to 10-7. So, right now, certainly not sitting in a great spot. It really felt like you had to win at least one of the last 2 games versus the Bears or the Cowboys. They weren't able to do that. So they got to have a big turnaround and fast, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I wish I could have a more optimistic outlook here for you guys because I want this team to succeed. And Lord knows it's fun when this team is playing well, but they're not right now, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm not going to lie to you guys and tell you that everything's going well because it's not. And unless they make some big changes in the weeks to come, it's going to continue to suck. So just a fair warning with that. But before we get into our first segment today, guys, type those me's in the chat if you want to shout out. We've got 130 people already in the chat. I see Malcolm Lloyd in here. We got Christopher Duncan. We got Walters Bakers. We got MK. We got Beansbridge. We've got Cassie Voth, my lovely fiance. Everyone say hi to Cassie. We got Richard Barker. We got Mo. We got Tricky Jacob. We got Eon. We got Mo. I see Eon, J.R. Gomez, Blake Hershey, Beans Brigade have all gotten questions in. Eon's got a question in. Malcolm Lloyd has a question in. So again, guys, use hashtag Commanders to get in on the mailbag here today. And we're going to get into our first segment right now, guys. The latest news and rumors surrounding the Washington Commanders. A lot of new trade intel that I'm going to be sharing my opinion on. Also, we have some news on Jayden Daniels and his status from Monday. Then I'll get into my list of Commanders trade candidates. I've got some players on this Commanders roster that Adam Peters can look to unload at the trade deadline if they want to be sellers and get some extra draft capital for next year. And then I'll be taking your questions at the end of the show. So make sure you get those questions in. Without further ado, let's get into our first segment on today's program. On today's edition of the Commanders Report, Jayden Daniels is officially out for Week 8 versus the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Going to be breaking down what impact that's going to have on the Washington Commanders' game plan and my confidence level in Marucs Mariota as he takes the reins this week yet again. But then I'll also get into the latest Commanders trade news and intel. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because if the Commanders make a big trade before the NFL trade deadline, we are going to have a breaking news video for you guys, and that is our promise here on the Commanders Reports, that we will always be providing you guys that breaking news coverage whenever the Commanders make a move at any time during the NFL schedule. So make sure you click that subscribe button right now and join the Commanders Report family today. We'll start with the bad news here, guys, that Jayden Daniels is officially out for Monday Night Football versus the Kansas City Chiefs with a hamstring injury. And we kind of expected this, even with these kind of minor hamstring injuries. Usually you miss a week, and usually you're putting yourself at risk if you play through that injury 1 week after suffering, those kinds of injuries. Soft tissue stuff can be fickle as well, so we'll see when Jayden can get back into the lineup. Hopefully he can get back for Sunday Night Football in Week 9 versus the Seattle Seahawks. But Marucs Mariota is going to be making his third start this season. He's played quite a bit over the last 2 years for the Washington Commanders. He already has 2 starts under his belt with the Commanders this season. He had quite a few last year as well, played quite a bit and played pretty darn well for this football team and this offense last season. And in moments, he's looked pretty good this year. But his numbers as a whole, not necessarily fantastic. Certainly not at the level as where they were last year. Like, he was at over 70% completion percentage. Like, he was so efficient for this offense last year. But this year, in the pretty much 2.5 games he's played, about 60% completion percentage for just over 420 yards, for 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, and an uninspiring passer rating. So, Marucs hasn't been playing at the same level this year as last year, but then again, he hasn't had Terry McLaurin to throw to when he's been playing, right? So, I think that there's some reasons for why Mariota hasn't been quite as successful this year as last. But, if Mariota has help, it's possible. We talked about it on yesterday's show that Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel could be back in the lineup this week. If he has both of those guys, plus Zach Ertz is out there, plus hopefully you can get the run game going a little bit more with Bill Krosky-Merritt, and this offensive line can finally start getting some push again up front. If you can give Mariota all those things, he's proven he can be a very efficient, very good backup quarterback. You can make an argument, in my opinion, he's a top 40 quarterback in the world today. He's probably not like a franchise-level starter guy, but, with Jayden Daniels out, Mariota can run. He can throw the ball relatively accurately, and, he knows how to operate this offense, this kind of air raidy style of offense that Cliff Kingsbury wants to run here in Washington. So that really is the big X factor for Mariota, in my opinion. Can they give him enough help? And then not only on the offensive side of the ball, but also on defense. Can they have a bounce-back performance on defense this week versus a really good Kansas City offense? I think that's a dubious proposition at best, especially if they continue to play Bobby Wagner and Marshawn Lattimore, but I digress, okay? So let me know down there in the comment section. Confidence level in Marucs Mariota as this team's backup quarterback. Put it on a scale of 1, meaning no confidence at all, he's absolutely terrible, to 10, meaning this offense is just fine, Marcus is really, really good. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. YouTube, in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. While I tell you about Prize Picks, get down there in the comment section and answer today's pinned question. With that said, word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And you and I, we make decisions every single day. But on Prize Picks, being right with your decisions can actually get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Football season is here and in full swing, and you better believe I'll be getting my Prize Picks lineups in all season long. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks also puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Prize Picks also offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And a new feature from Prize Picks that's new this year that I absolutely love is injury reboots. There's nothing worse than putting in a play and then somebody gets injured and it completely ruins your lineup. But with this new feature from Prize Picks, if one of your players leaves the game in the first half and does not return, Prize Picks will not count it as a loss. So just to take a look here at my Prize Picks lineup for Thursday Night Football this week, I'm taking the less on passing yards for Justin Herbert, the more on Justin Jefferson receiving yards, and I'm taking the more on rushing yards for Kamani Vidal. They're starting running back there in L.A. with Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton out of the lineup. So download the app today if you want to get a play in and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So now let's dive into the latest Commanders trade news and intel from around NFL media, people linking certain players to the Commanders. What are people saying in terms of the Washington Commanders and what they're going to be doing in terms of a trade within the next 2 weeks, because the trade deadline is now less than 2 weeks away. So let's start with ESPN here, where they have connected two trade targets and candidates to the Washington Commanders. You got the cornerback from the Cincinnati Bengals, Cam Taylor-Britt, and then the safety from the New England Patriots, Kyle Duggar. Let's take these guys on one at a time, starting with Cam Taylor-Britt. And ESPN projects this trade that they say, quote-unquote, makes sense for both sides here, where the Commanders would get Cam Taylor-Britt to, essentially replace Marshawn Lattimore on the outside, and then the Bengals get Noah Igbenogany, the backup slot corner here in Washington, plus a 7th-round pick next season. This is what Bill Barnwell from ESPN, who had this idea, in his justification for this trade. He says the Bengals might want to be finished with Taylor-Britt, a 2022 second-round pick who hasn't lived up to expectations in Cincinnati. He has flashed at times during his pro career with 7 interceptions between the 2023 and 2024 campaigns, but he has been benched at different points in each of the past 3 seasons. In the final year of his rookie deal, Taylor-Britt is owed $2.4 million. It would be a surprise if he returned to the Bengals next season, so this would be an opportunity to move somewhere with a meaningful track record of turning around frustrating careers. He would step in as a reserve cornerback on the outside for the Commanders, who are allowing more yards per dropback without pressure than any other team in the NFL. Dan Quinn needs to consider making changes given how the likes of Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Sainristil have played this season. Adding another cornerback with Taylor-Britt's coverage ability when things go right and feel for the football would give the Commanders another option if they do decide to sit one of their starters for any period of time. And honestly, guys, if the Commanders do decide to make a trade for a player, I do think Cam Taylor-Britt makes some sense for the Washington Commanders. He's somebody that's really fast, somebody that does have starting experience in this league, and he's only 26 years old, so if he works out, he could play alongside Trey Amos on the outside as one of the starting corners here for the Washington Commanders for years to come. Plus, the price tag that Barnwell suggests here, giving up Igbenogany, who isn't playing at all right now, and a 7th-round pick, I think that's something that's relatively reasonable for the Washington Commanders. And if they feel like they want to let go of Lattimore, bring in somebody that's younger, somebody that could be a part of the long-term solution here in Washington, I'd be open to it. But honestly, guys, my solution, if you're going to get rid of Marshawn Lattimore, is go put Mike Sainristil on the outside. He played so much better there last year, and he's just not a fit in the slot in the National Football League, all right? So I would actually address that outside cornerback position with Samerstill and just keep your 7th-round pick at this point. But then we get to Kyle Duggar, where Jeremy Fowler said this about the Patriots potentially letting go of Duggar. He said, the belief in league circles is that Duggar would have been dealt before week 1, but for his cost-prohibitive $9.75 million salary. There was interest then and could be again. Now that New England is sitting at 5-2, perhaps it will revisit a potential deal. However, Duggar has played a combined 102 defensive snaps over the past 2 weeks due to an injury to starter Jalen Hawkins, which might change things. Duggar would be a quality at third safety insurance option for a team in contention. Now listen, man, I like the idea of going to kind of like a quote-unquote big nickel 3 safety defense. We're seeing it with a bunch of different defenses in the National Football League today, with Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore and Jalen Ramsey with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know, there's a number of teams that play 3 safeties in their nickel packages versus putting in like a true slot corner. And Duggar could, you know, potentially allow the Commanders to play that style of defense, which is really interesting to me. But personally, I would just go out in free agency, not have to give up a draft pick to go get him. You can go get C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who is free on the free agency market right now. And honestly, I think, you know, not only does he have more experience playing the nickel position and in the slot than Kyle Duggar does, but honestly, I think that, you know, he would be a better fit for this Commanders defense from day one. So is C.J. Gardner-Johnson a little bit of a live wire and a little bit of a weird kind of behavior type of guy in the locker room? Sure, but like I think at this point you got to switch some things up with the Washington Commanders. And like when I look at what I would do to fix this Commanders defense, I would get rid of Marshawn Lattimore on the outside, put Samerstill on the outside where he played a lot better last season, and then you put C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who you don't have to give a draft pick up for, in the big nickel spot. I think that's the best way forward. You don't have to give up any draft picks in that particular scenario. So I'm not quite sure why the Washington Commanders are being linked as one of the top destinations for Kyle Duggar at this point. But now we can move over to Bleacher Report here, where they listed the Washington Commanders as a top 2 suitor to trade for Raiders wide receiver Jakobi Meyers, who is widely believed to be traded before the NFL trade deadline this year. The author of this particular article is Christopher Knox from Bleacher Report, who had to say this about why he thinks the Commanders could be in play for Meyers. He says, Raiders wide receiver Jakobi Meyers becomes the new top receiver on our board for a couple of reasons. For one, he requested a trade before the start of the season. Secondly, the Raiders are now quote-unquote open to moving him, per Diana Rossini of The Athletic. While Meyers, who is dealing with knee and toe injuries, was inactive for Week 7, he's expected to be available after Las Vegas' Week 8 bye. Receiver-needy teams should see if he can be available for them in Week 9. Meyers will be a free agent in the spring, but he won't turn 30 until late next season and has had stretches of terrific play. And in this article, Christopher Knox says that his projected trade value for the 29-year-old Meyers is somewhere between a round 5 to a round 7 pick. And it's like, listen, man, if you can give up one of your 6th round picks for him or a 7th round pick for Jakobi Meyers, I am 100% down for that deal. He is a legitimate number 2 receiver in this league, machine gun feet that can really get open versus man coverage. He's really smart too, trying to get open versus zone coverage. He's got terrific hands. He's not much of a deep threat, but the Commanders have Terry McLaurin and Jalen Lane to be able to win deep. So, on paper, and if the Commanders were winning more and they were for sure buying at the deadline, and Noah Brown was like out for the season or something like that, I would certainly be interested in Jakobi Meyers. But personally, I wouldn't be in on this at this point in the year. Okay, you got Terry McLaurin, who's going to be returning from injury here in short order. Same thing goes for Deebo Samuel. And frankly, you got some pretty decent pieces behind them in terms of number 3 receiver options, all right? Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane have shown flashes. Chris Moore has shown flashes. Robbie Chosen looked pretty good last week against the Dallas Cowboys, and you just brought in Treylon Burks. So right now, I'm not sure if the Commanders are in a position where they're going to go out and trade for another older wide receiver that is approaching 30 years old when they just paid one in Terry McLaurin all that money, and they have another one on the roster in Deebo Samuel. So, with all due respect to Bleacher Report and Christopher Knox, I just don't see this as a realistic possibility for the Washington Commanders, as fun as it might be to envision Jakobi Meyers in Burgundy and Gold. So pick your favorite. Out of the 3 guys that have been linked to the Washington Commanders by various different outlets, which one would you like the most for the Commanders to go out and get? Type CTB for Cam Taylor-Britt, KD for Kyle Duggar, or JM for Jakobi Meyers. If I had to pick one right now, given the price tag, I'd probably go Cam Taylor-Britt. But, honestly, I'm not too keen on any of these options, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. But let me know your favorite down there in the comments section. Now we'll finish up today's show with the Athletics' Nikki Javala, who covers the team for the Athletic, and she says that the Washington Commanders should, quote-unquote, stand pat at the deadline and not make any trades whatsoever. This is what Nikki had to say about what she thinks the Commanders should do at the deadline this year. The Commanders made a splash by trading for cornerback Marshawn Lattimore at the deadline last year, but they were 7-2 at the time and suddenly one of the hottest teams in the league. Their plan to rebuild was expedited, and they believed they had a chance to contend with some help on the back end. Much has changed since then. Washington is 3-4 this season with 2 primetime games, a Monday night road game in Kansas City, then the Sunday night meeting with the Seahawks at home before the trade deadline. The Commanders' roster is in shambles because of injuries, and their defense is spiraling. Giving up more draft picks when they're deficient in many areas wouldn't make sense, and the players they might be willing to part with may not generate interest elsewhere. Now, I largely agree with Nikki's analysis here, man. You don't have a ton of draft capital, especially in the early rounds of the draft. You do have a first-round pick and a third-round pick, but you don't have picks in round 2. You don't have picks in round 4. You only have one in round 5, round 3, and then round 1, respectively. And if you give up another one there, that's just not going to be tenable to get more young talent on this roster moving forward. It's just not a good strategy if you're looking to get younger and you're trying to get faster, and the youth movement that I want the Commanders to really embrace here over the next several years, with Jayden Daniels being the thing that you build this team around. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially after a 3-4 start. And who knows, by the deadline they might be 3-6 at that point. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to spend more draft picks on veteran players when you really should be using those draft picks on younger players that you develop over time with this football team. And if anything, Washington should sell at the deadline, trade players away, like maybe Daron Payne, who could be got for a pretty decent draft pick right now, or maybe Andrew Wiley. Teams are always looking for offensive line help, and now with Sam Cosmi back, Wiley could maybe be got for a day 3 draft pick, right? There's some options for the Commanders to consider in terms of selling some players. Maybe even they think about trading Deebo Samuel. Maybe there's a team out there that would love a gadget player like him. Deebo's just on a 1-year deal, and he's an older veteran as well. So there's some options there for the Commanders to consider in terms of trying to get more draft picks, but in terms of getting a veteran player to help you win this year, unless you're getting that player for a 6th or 7th round pick, I'm really not that interested at all in those types of deals. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will the Commanders make any trades before the deadline this year? Give me a yes or no down there in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think, and that'll be it for today's edition of the Commanders Report by Chat Sports. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day here to come watch some Commanders content with us. We provide you guys free, informative, and entertaining Commanders coverage every single day on this channel. So if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. And until tomorrow, guys, out to the Commanders. All right, first segment in the books. We still got 2 more to go here, Ponzi. Trade candidates are coming up. Or I said trade candidates, right? Yeah, I did. Trade candidates are coming up next. We just finished that video telling you guys about how the Commanders should probably look to sell more than they should look to buy at the trade deadline this year. So we're going to go over specifics, all right? We're going to go over specific names that I think the Commanders could potentially look to deal before the trade deadline this year, especially if they lose these next 2 games before the deadline hits, okay? So that's going to be our next segment. And just a little bit of a reminder here, guys, that coming up next, after this next segment, we're going to be getting into our live mailbag. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you want to get your comment on the show today, all you have to do is put #Commanders down there in the live chat. But I will warn you guys, it's up to Ponzi to see which questions get on the show. All right, and we're already good on questions? All right, great. So if you have any more questions, feel free to put them in there. But I'm not going to make you guys wait any longer. Let's get into our next segment of Commanders coverage here, guys. The latest trade candidates for the Washington Commanders are coming at you guys right now. Oh, Ponzi says, give me 1 second. Oh my God, I had it teed up perfectly for him, and he's just. Oh my goodness. All right, let's get into it right now. The latest trade candidates surrounding the Commanders. With the Commanders sitting at 3-4 and with two very tough teams on the horizon in the Kansas City Chiefs and the Seattle Seahawks being their next two opponents before the NFL trade deadline, it's a very real possibility that the Washington Commanders could be selling at the NFL trade deadline this year, potentially with a record of 3-6 and the season essentially being over, which is a really sad, reality or sad, possibility to think of as a Washington Commanders fan, especially with the high expectations that this team had coming into the year. But today on the Commanders Report, we're going to be talking trade candidates before the trade deadline. All right, Commanders players on the roster right now that I think could realistically be dealt and other teams would actually want before the trade deadline hits this year. So before we get into the content today, kick us off down there in the comment section by letting me know, should the Washington Commanders be buyers or sellers at the deadline this year? Type B for buyers or S for sellers to kick off today's show. And with that here, I want to start here with this thought right here that I really doubt that the Washington Commanders are going to be buyers at the deadline, guys. All right, not only because I think that they'll probably end up losing the next two games versus the Chiefs and Seahawks, respectively, especially if Jayden Daniels can't play, and especially if this team continues to bang their head against the wall when it comes to veteran players on defense like Marshon Lattimore and Bobby Wagner, two guys that are clearly liabilities for this team, yet this coaching staff just seems super dedicated to and locked in on. Frankly, I don't want to give up draft picks if I'm the Washington Commanders. You're already down your second-round pick and your fourth-round pick for next year's draft. And, sure, you got 2 sixth-round picks, but you only have 6 total picks, and half of those picks come in either round 6 or round 7, where you're probably not going to find long-term options. Those are lottery tickets at best, all right? So I think if you're the Washington Commanders, you want to embrace a youth movement in the years to come where you're trying to put young talent around Jayden Daniels and try to build something special here over the next several years. I think in order to do that, something that could help with that is that you could sell at the trade deadline to get more picks. Now, hey, if the Commanders turn it around and they can get a win versus either, the Chiefs or the Seahawks, and they can prove they can hang with the big boys in the National Football League this year, all right, maybe you think about standing pat at least, or maybe even, trading a 6th or 7th round pick for a veteran that can help you out. You can think about that. But with the current trajectory of the team, I would say right now perhaps the more smarter move would be to trade away a player in order to get more draft capital so you can get more young players and young talent around Jayden Daniels in the years to come. Now, the 3 guys on the roster that the Commanders probably can't trade off, but I think they probably should try, are Marshon Lattimore, Bobby Wagner, and Brandon Coleman. All right? These are 3 players that, the Commanders have straight up given up on Brandon Coleman at this point. He's been a quote-unquote healthy scratch for many weeks on end here. And then Marshon Lattimore and Bobby Wagner have been straight up liabilities for this Commanders defense over the last, or really this entire season. They just don't have it anymore, unfortunately. And, realistically, I don't see anyone trading for those guys. Maybe there's a team that really likes Brandon Coleman's talent and would trade a 7th-round pick for him or something like that. But I think you'd be pretty lucky to find a sucker that would be wanting Marshon Lattimore, Bobby Wagner, or Brandon Coleman at this point in time. So even though I would love for Adam Peters to unload those guys, I think they're probably more closer to cut candidates than they are trade candidates at this point in time. And honestly, I would consider doing that, even though, Bobby Wagner is your green dot. He's one of the leaders in the locker room, all that stuff. He's just unplayable. He just is, guys. And good offensive coordinators know this. They run off-tackle runs because they know Bobby Wagner isn't fast enough to catch up on the edge. And they also, target him both in man and in zone coverage when they're passing the football. So until you get these guys off the field, man, the defense is probably not going to get a whole lot better, especially when you play good offensive play callers. And that's just, that's just the stone cold truth. And we're going to give it to you straight here on the Commanders Report. But coming up here, I have 4 players on the Commanders roster that not only do I think the Commanders should think about letting go of, but also I think other teams might actually want in a trade before the trade deadline this year. But before we get into the rest of today's show, you guys can get a Jayden Daniels jersey from our our website here, chatsports.com/Daniels. If you don't have a Jayden Daniels jersey yet and you guys want the new Super Bowl era alternate jersey, that's a really cool looking one in my opinion. You can get that today, or you can get the black alternate. That one's a fan favorite as well. And then they also have the classic burgundy and the classic white on our website right now as well. Plus, part of the proceeds with every purchase made goes back to us here at Chat Sports. If you guys want to help us out and you want to get a Jayden Daniels jersey today, you can kill two birds with one stone by using our link, chatsports.com/Daniels. That link is in the comments and description of today's show. You click that link, you make a purchase, and we get part of the proceeds, and you get a Jayden Daniels jersey. So really do appreciate all of your guys' support in that regard. And now let's get into our trade candidates, and we'll start with Daron Payne. And I know, guys, I can hear you in the he's been awesome this year, and he's one of our best defensive players, all this different stuff. But that's part of the reason why it makes sense to let him go at this point in time, all right? Daron Payne has been awesome on film for the Washington Commanders this year. He's really having a career renaissance after, the last couple of seasons, ever since he got paid, frankly, he hasn't really been up to snuff. But this year, he's, outside of maybe Dorrance Armstrong, he's probably been the best defensive player for the Washington Commanders this year. Honestly, you could make an argument his price hasn't been this high in many seasons at this point in terms of what the Commanders could get for him in a trade. Now, Payne still has another year left on his deal, so maybe the Commanders feel like he can help this team win not only this year, but next year when they make another push with Jayden Daniels. But, could Washington think about selling him for the right price? If they can get a good draft pick for him, is it possible that they could unload him for, let's say a day 2 draft pick? I think that would be something that the Commanders would at least have to think about. And there are teams out there, like the Kansas City Chiefs, for example, that might be looking for defensive tackle help before the NFL trade deadline this year. Another reason why the Commanders might think about this is that it would give them an opportunity to move Jerzon Newton, their second-round pick last year out of Illinois, into a full-time starting position to see if he's got what it takes to be a long-term starter for this Commanders defense moving forward. Daron Payne is a little bit older, and his contract, he might be wanting a new contract extension next offseason. If the Commanders don't want to have to pay another going to be 30-plus-year-old player here coming up soon, a massive contract, it's possible that maybe they just want to move on from Daron Payne. And if you can get a second or third round pick for him right now, because he is playing very well, and you get an opportunity to play somebody that you just drafted with a high draft pick alongside Javon Kinlaw, who's played pretty darn well this year, I think that this is something that would make sense for the Washington Commanders. Now, I have to be very clear here. I'm not trading Daron Payne for nothing, all right? I'm not shopping him. I need to get a really good offer for him at this point because he is playing very well, and he can help this team over the next 2 years if the Commanders keep him around. So I need a good draft pick in return, at least a third-round pick to even consider moving him. But if someone calls me up and offers me that, I have to at least think about it at this point. Another guy that the Commanders can consider moving is Deebo Samuel. And right now, the Commanders have a lot of kind of older veterans on the team on one-year contracts, and Deebo's certainly one of them. There's a reason why this team didn't give Deebo a new contract when they traded for him this offseason, and that reason was they didn't want to, extend him long-term and commit to him. And with this team potentially looking towards a youth movement, which is what I hope they do heading into next offseason, I don't know if it makes sense to pay Deebo Samuel another relatively large contract when he's going to be 30 years old, right? When he's already, in that kind of range of when receivers kind of, dip in production and dip in athleticism. And some people have already said that Deebo's already started that process, right? So if the season is lost this year and you don't think you're going to win, it could make sense to unload him for a decent draft pick. And if you can get your return on investment on him, where you spent a fifth-round pick on him, if you could get a fifth-round pick back in exchange for Deebo Samuel, I would take that in a heartbeat. Now, I want to see what the Commanders do over the next few weeks. Like, they probably have to lose the next 2 games and be 3-6, and the season is essentially over for me to consider this, because Deebo can help this team win. If they can turn things around over the next couple of weeks and they can prove that they can hang with the big boys and Deebo plays well, it's like, all right, then we can keep Deebo the rest of the year and then adjust at the end of the season and make a decision. But if the season's over, if you're sitting at 3-6 at the deadline and someone offers me a fifth-round pick, I'm probably unloading Deebo Samuel. So subscribe for free today, guys, because we give you guys free and daily entertaining Commanders videos just like today's video. Also, if the Commanders do make a trade, we'll have breaking news coverage on this channel. Help us get to 50,000 subscribers, guys. We have weekly live shows, weekly watch parties for every single Commanders game. We put out a video every single day breaking down the latest surrounding the Washington Commanders, and you get all that content 100% free. So if you want to join the largest individually run Commanders news program anywhere on YouTube, that's us here at the Commanders Report, so click that subscribe button today. Another guy that I think could be traded away before the deadline here is Andrew Wiley, kind of a rotational kind of swing player on the offensive line for the Washington Commanders. Wiley can play right tackle, he can play right guard, and he's played at both of those spots quite a bit as a starter throughout his NFL career, including this year where he played pretty well as a starting guard for this Washington Commanders team while Sam Cosmi was still getting back from his injury. And listen, man, there's a lot of teams around the National Football League that could use O-line help, especially veteran offensive line help, guys that have played a lot of snaps in the National Football League. So if there's somebody out there that needs a starting right guard for the rest of the season and, you know, they don't want to have to pay like a higher draft pick to be able to get them, I think Andrew Wiley is somebody that could realistically be dealt by the Washington Commanders. And, you know, if you are at home saying, Jack, I don't want to trade our depth, you know, swing offensive lineman, well, it's like if the season's over, do you really need him? I mean, he's probably going to be gone at the end of the season regardless. So, you know, Wiley's years of experience at tackle and guard and that versatility make him somebody that multiple teams may be interested in. And, you know, for a late day 3 pick, whether it's a round 6 or round 7 pick, I think that's, you know, another lottery ticket that you can add to the Commanders' arsenal in the late rounds of the draft next year. That would make sense for this football team. So that's where I'm at with Andrew Wiley. I think that, you know, there's teams out there that could use a guy like Wiley out there, a 1-year rental for maybe if they have an injury at a very key position on their offensive line, he can come in and he can, you know, be a Band-Aid for that team. For a late day 3 pick. So that's where I'm at with him. Then we get to Zach Ertz, our final name that we're going to discuss on today's show. And, you know, I get it. Zach Ertz is Jayden Daniels' safety blanket. He is his binky. You know, he's a great zone possession type of receiving tight end. And, you know, I really like Zach Ertz, and he plays a very important role in this offense. But, you know, this is maybe Ertz's last season in the National Football League, and it's probably his last season in Washington. Maybe he comes back for 1 more year, but he's on an expiring contract. And if this is his last year, you know, maybe Washington would do him a solid and send him to a contending football team. If this team is 3-6 and the season is over in a couple of weeks. I think that is a somewhat realistic possibility if a team is willing to give you like a late round draft pick for somebody that can, you know, help their team as a good possession type tight end. I could see that being a possibility, and kind of like how trading Deron Payne away would give Jerzon Newton, a young draft pick, an opportunity to play. Trading Zach Ertz would give Ben Sinnott more opportunities in this offense, specifically as that receiving threat in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. So, you know, they spent a 2nd-round pick on Ben Sinnott, and they really haven't used him all that much, especially as a receiver. So at some point, you got to see what you have in Ben, and, you know, maybe they've seen enough in practice to not want to give him a shot, and they're just going to keep Zach Ertz. But listen, man, if you're sitting at 3-6, which is a possibility, and somebody offers me like a round 6 pick for Zach Ertz, somebody that's maybe not going to be even playing football next year, you know, I'm cashing in on that, and I'm getting another lottery ticket to use in the 2026 NFL Draft. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Which Commanders player is the most likely to be traded before the deadline this year? Is it Andrew Wiley? Is it Deron Payne? Is it Deebo Samuel? Is it somebody else? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section, what your answer is to that question. And that'll be it for today's edition of the Commanders Report. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we're going to give you guys the latest trade buzz surrounding the Washington Commanders just about every single day on this channel. So if you don't want to miss any of that leading up to the NFL trade deadline in less than 2 weeks, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, hail to the Commanders. All right, Ponzi. So coming up here, we've got our mailbag. It sounds like we got plenty of questions already, so let's just get right into it, man. We got over 200 people watching live. If you guys want to click that thumbs up icon and like today's show, our goal is to get to 100 likes on today's show, guys. So if we can get 30 more people to click that thumbs up icon, that would be absolutely terrific. It would certainly make my bosses happy if we could hit our goal here today. So if you want me to avoid a little bit of the wrath of my bosses, help us get to 100 likes and click that thumbs up icon. But without further ado, let's get into the questions. Some really good stuff coming up here. I'm sure you guys always bring the fire when it comes to these mailbags, so let's get into it. Welcome into the Commander's Report Mailbag. I am your host, Jack Sperry. Today, I am answering your questions on the Washington Commanders here in Week 8 as this team prepares to take on the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football here in the 8th week of the NFL season. Now, before we get into the questions today, make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already to join the most interactive Commanders fan community anywhere here on YouTube. We have daily Commanders community posts and polls for you guys to vote on this channel. We also give you guys daily, free, and informative Commanders content, I should say. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And we also do these mailbags on our live shows every single Wednesday where you guys have an opportunity to get your questions on the Washington Commanders on the show. So without further ado, let's show our first question this week, which comes from Malcolm Lloyd. It says, what's everyone's opinion on our rookie tackle? So Josh Connerly Jr. Certainly is taking his rookie lumps, which sucks because they really drafted him as the quote-unquote pro-ready tackle guy. You know, he was known as the technician, and he was known as the guy with quick feet coming out of Oregon, and he just hasn't been that. And, you know, he's been a walking mistake, quite frankly. He's gotten a lot of penalties. He's given up a lot of pressures. And even last week, you know, going up against Jadeveon Clowney, he was just clowning him. I mean, you know, pun intended, okay? Like, Josh Connerly Jr. gave up a sack, multiple pressures, multiple penalties. He wasn't good in run blocking either. He's been disappointing. But he's still young, right? He's still developing, and you're hoping that as the rookie season goes on and as he gets into year 2 and in year 3, he becomes a legitimate starter here for the Washington Commanders. But, you know, I think a lot of people expected him to be a big part of a big revamp of this offensive line, and he was going to be able to come in and be, you know, a very steady piece right away. That's why they drafted him over a guy like, say, Josh Simmons, who has looked phenomenal for Kansas City when he's been playing for them. It's been disappointing so far, man, and hopefully he can get better. Then we got one from Beans Brigade who says, how much does the loss of Dorrance Armstrong affect our defensive line? Quite a bit, man, because he was arguably your best and most effective defensive player on the team. And he had a ton of sacks. He was being disruptive against the run. He was winning the line of scrimmage. He was holding the edge, which was really important job for this Commanders defense and run defense. And now you're losing him. And not only do you miss him, but you're losing your other starting edge, Dietrich Wise, for the rest of the season. You don't have Javonte Jean-Baptiste, another rotational guy in this rotation. And you know, Preston Smith is unplayable. Jacob Martin, I thought, actually played pretty well versus the Cowboys last week. Von Miller has popped up in moments, but he hasn't really been an impact so far this year. Honestly, the way that I would address this position is, you know, they brought up Jalen Lane from the practice squad. I don't really want to play him that much. The way that I want the coaching staff to address this, Beans Brigade, is to put Frankie Luvu at defensive end. All right, he's technically an off-ball linebacker, but he's not very good tackling out in space, and he's not good in pass coverage. What he's best at is the stuff that pass rushers do. All right, getting after the quarterback. You know, pass rushing on the edge. You know, being a QB spy and being a cleanup player. You know, that's the way that I want this defense to use Frankie Luvu. And now that you have all these injuries at defensive end, it has never made more sense than now to play Frankie Luvu at that position. So that's what I would do. And honestly, I would bench Bobby Wagner as the other inside linebacker and completely overhaul your inside linebacker duo. Go from Frankie Luvu and Bobby Wagner, and I would play Jordan McGee and Ali Cahoe at the two off-ball linebacker positions while I move Frankie Luvu to defensive end, and while I move Bobby Wagner to the bench. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Should the Commanders move Frankie Luvu to edge? Give me yes or no down there in the comment section. I think it's a good idea. I think that Frankie, would be a good defensive end. Now he's a little bit undersized, so this is why I kind of want to go to a big nickel kind of defense, so that big nickel can help out on his side of the formation. But let me know what you guys think. For today's pinned question, YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a few seconds. When that happens, take advantage of that time by giving me a yes or no. Got one from Blake. Says, what's your thoughts on drafting Carnell Tate in round 1 if we address defense in free agency? Listen, man, Carnell Tate's an awesome player. I would absolutely love to add him, but it's really, really early to talk about, draft stuff at this point. We don't even know, what the draft needs are going to be for the Washington Commanders. We have some idea. I'm guessing that wide receiver will be one of those positions that they look at. I kind of doubt they bring back Deebo Samuel next year at this point. But there's multiple positions that they could add at, like cornerback. They could add a safety. They could definitely get inside linebacker. All right, defensive end might be a position that they're looking at as well. They might be looking at offensive line again. Like there's a lot of different positions that they're going to be looking at in the draft next year. But if they draft Carnell Tate in round 1, man, he's a hell of a player. To pair him up with Terry McLaurin, the 2 Ohio State boys, would be a hell of a combo for Jayden Daniels. Then we got one from Tricky Jacob, says, sign C.J. Gardner-Johnson. We could definitely use a cornerback for more improvement for our defense. Yeah, man, and, technically C.J. Gardner-Johnson's a safety, but he has played a lot of nickel in his career, and he's played a lot in the slot. So, I think that if you want to embrace kind of a modern trend in the National Football League on the defensive side of the ball, with guys like Mike McDonald and Brian Flores and, even Bill Belichick towards the end of his career in the NFL. They played a lot of 3 safety packages. All right, Pittsburgh's doing this right now with Jalen Ramsey, who's a big nickel corner for them. C.J. Gardner-Johnson can certainly fill that role for this defense, and, I think it could bring a much-needed element of physicality to this group that is desperately needed and is not there right now in the current state of the Commanders' defense. Then we got one from Vern. Says, how about going after Jakobi Meyers? He has asked for a trade. Listen, man, I want to get more young talent on this Commanders team, and I'm really not interested in trading another kind of higher draft pick on a 29-year-old wide receiver, and then your 3 starting receivers would all be 29 years old or older at that point. All right, Terry is around that 30 range as well. Same thing with Deebo, and of course Jakobi will be turning 30 next year. So I don't know if I want to buy at the deadline, if I'm being completely honest, Vern, unless the Commanders win at least one of their next 2 games and there's something that makes sense. And hey, if the Raiders are getting rid of Jakobi Meyers for like a 7th-round pick or something and the Commanders can get him for that, all right, fine. He's a 1-year rental, whatever. But even then, like, you're giving up another, lottery ticket for a young player that could potentially work out. All right, if we traded our 7th-round pick this year, we wouldn't have gotten Bill Krosky-Merritt, right? Sometimes these picks do work out. So unless you really feel like you can make a run this year, at some point, I just don't know if a Jakobi Meyers trade makes a ton of sense. He's a good player, and if the Commanders were winning more, I'd be all over this, Vern. But right now, it's not looking great for this football team, and because of that, I want to keep my draft picks. If anything, I want to sell players to get more draft picks for the future. Now, before we get into the rest of your questions here this week, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And you and I make decisions every single day. But on Prize Picks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Football season is finally here, and you better believe I'll be getting my Prize Picks lineups in all season long. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks also puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Prize Picks also offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And a new feature from Prize Picks that I absolutely love is injury reboots. If one of your players leaves the game in the first half and does not return, Prize Picks will not count it as a loss. So for Thursday Night Football this week, I'm taking the less on passing yards for Justin Herbert, the more on Justin Jefferson receiving yards, and the more on rushing yards for Chargers running back Kamani Vidal. So download the Prize Picks app today on your phone for free. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Got one from District Fanatic. Says, do you think JD5 will be healthy by week 9 since he will get rest this week? Sure hope so, man. Sure hope so, because, he is a dynamic playmaker for this Commanders team. He practically carried this team to an NFC Championship berth last year as a rookie, and he's still one of the premier quarterback talents in this league, in my opinion, okay? So whenever you can have him in the lineup, it's better. So hopefully he can play in week 9, especially if they lose this week versus Kansas City, because If you're sitting at 3-5 with a chance to go down 3-6 before the trade deadline, that might be the difference between the Commanders selling or maybe even potentially buying at the deadline this year. So hopefully they can win one of these next 2 games. Hopefully JD can get back for that Week 9 matchup because, frankly, the Commanders are not going to have a huge chance of winning if, A, their defense doesn't get a lot better in the next 2 weeks, or B, Jayden Daniels is not out there. So, we'll see what ends up happening there. District, certainly hope JD can get healthy soon. Then we got one from Joe Gibbs, who says, do you think our defensive problems are more of a personnel issue or a defensive coordinator issue? I personally put more blame on Joe, not going to lie. I would personally disagree with that, Joe. I would say it's more of a personnel issue. All right, I'm not sure if there's a ton of defensive coordinators that could have success with how slow the personnel in Washington is, okay? I don't care how good of a schemer you are. When you have a guy like Bobby Wagner out there that can't change direction, can't accelerate, and doesn't have good long speed either, like, he's going to get destroyed against good offensive coordinators. There's really nothing you can do to hide a player like that at the off-ball linebacker position unless you blitz him literally on every play. And then even then, if you blitz him on every play, your defense is still being put in positions to fail, in my opinion, because the opposing offense knows what's coming. So, I think that with Marshawn Lattimore playing as poorly as he's playing, Mike Sainristil playing as poorly as he's playing, I'm not saying Joe has necessarily done a great job coordinating this defense this year, but it's just a fact that these guys on the field are just absolutely atrocious at this point. Now, part of that's coaching. Part of that is, maybe the coaching staff is not putting them in positions to succeed. Maybe it's the coaching points they're making in practice. Maybe it's a culture thing where they're not enforcing high standards, even though I personally don't think that's the case. I'm a believer in Dan Quinn's culture. But, I personally think the biggest issue with this defense, Joe, is that there's a lot of old people on it, and they can't run anymore, and they can't hang with all these younger, faster players that they're going up against and their liabilities. So until you get faster, until you get younger on this defense and you start shifting some things around in the personnel, I'm not sure if we're going to get like a legit look at whether this is Joe Witt Jr.'s fault or whether this is just a personnel issue. So that's another reason why I think we need to make changes on this defensive rotation pronto. So make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already, if you are a real one. Really do appreciate you guys putting in your questions today. We still got a couple more, but if you appreciate the work that we put in every single week to give you guys daily and free Commanders content here on the show, click that thumbs up icon. It really does help out this video. All right, so now Malcolm Lloyd again here says, is it true about Max Crosby and the Cowboys? Probably clickbait, but do we have a shot? No, we're not trading for Max Crosby. I don't think we're going to make a trade for any veteran player, period. But the Raiders have apparently, and this was, I can't remember who had it yesterday. I think it was Pelissero had it this week, where he said that the Raiders sat down with Max Crosby and they told him to his face, we're not trading you, man. They just paid him a massive contract this offseason. He's locked up long term, and he's still relatively young. He's a foundational building block for them. So no matter how many times they reboot this kind of rebuild machine in Las Vegas, I don't think they're going to let go of Max Crosby, at least until that contract starts to wane down a little bit. So no, I think the Cowboys might have been interested in Max Crosby, but I highly doubt the Las Vegas Raiders are even entertained that. Maybe Jerry called him and said, hey, what do you think about Max Crosby? And boom, right? He just hung up the phone immediately because it just doesn't make any sense. So no, Malcolm, I don't think Crosby goes to the Cowboys, and he's probably almost definitely not coming to the Washington Commanders. Then we got one from J.R. Gomez. Says, do you feel we would be better served to go to man-to-man coverage? Zone is not working here. Frankly, JR, nothing's working here. Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Sainristil, these guys are not good enough in man coverage to be able to go up man-to-man versus the best receivers in the league, plain and simply. And then, same thing goes for Bobby Wagner. Like if you play man coverage, Bobby Wagner's going to be one-on-one versus tight ends, and if they have an athletic tight end or, sometimes he's going to be matched up on a running back. I mean, remember that one play where he was matched up one-on-one versus Bijan Robinson? I mean, this is just what offensive coordinators are going to do. If you go to man-to-man coverage, then they're going to exploit the slow players that the Commanders have on the team. But, if you play zone, of course, these guys are not instinctual enough to play zone, so they're going to get ripped up. So, I really don't see a solution to what the Commanders can do to get themselves better on defense other than getting the slow players off the field. All right, once you get the slow players off the field, then what I think you should do is you should run a very creative kind of zone blitz style of defense where you're shifting players post-snap. You're putting a lot of bodies close to the line of scrimmage to make quarterbacks kind of decipher, okay, who's coming on the blitz, who's not coming on the blitz, have them thinking about that, and then force them to read the defense post-snap. I think that's what a lot of the top defenses in the league do, especially the ones with limited personnel, especially in the secondary, because they're not good enough to just play man-to-man coverage, and they're not good enough to just play straight zone coverage either, so they're going to have to get creative to get some success on defense. Then we got one from Clay Thomas, says, who makes the most sense to trade or would even gain any trade interest? I would say the four guys that I would say are guys that some teams may want in a trade that the Commanders could be willing to let go of. I would say Daron Payne, somebody that I would need a good draft pick for, but you can make an argument his trade price is never going to be higher, and he's getting older as well. Then you got Deebo Samuel, who's on a one-year deal. I don't think the Commanders are going to want to give another big contract to a player at his age. They already paid Terry a multi-year extension. I don't think they're going to want to pay another older vet next offseason. Andrew Wiley, teams are always looking for offensive line help, and Wiley can play either right guard or right tackle. And then Zach Ertz, if the team is done, if they're sitting at 3-6 and their season is done in 2 weeks, and a team offers me a 6th or 7th round pick for Zach Ertz, who might be in the final year of his career, I think, getting another lottery ticket is worth it. So I would say those are probably the four guys that teams could be interested in that the Commanders could realistically trade away. I would say the one that has to be the most expensive is Daron Payne, but everyone else I'm probably willing to give up for a mid to late day 3 draft pick. With Daron Payne, I probably need at least a day 2 draft pick to let go of him. Good question, Clay. All right, so coming up is our next weigh-in question here, guys. Give me your confidence level in the Commanders to turn this season around. Put it on a scale of 1, meaning they're done, season is over, no confidence at all, to 10, meaning they're going to turn it around and they're going to compete for a Super Bowl this year. Let me know your scale of 1 to 10. What number is your confidence level in this Commanders team to turn the season around? That'll be it for this week's mailbag here on the Commanders Report. Thank you guys so much for stopping by here today. Thank you to everybody that tuned in on the live show this week to submit your questions. And until next time, guys, hail to the Commanders. All right, so Ponzi, let's finish up today's show by talking a little bit. F Ponzi in the chat for effing up that graphic, by the way. But oh my goodness, Ponzi, it's just a mess here today. But we are playing the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Yeah, it was just the highlight. But the Commanders are playing the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football this week, Ponzi. And if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I don't love this matchup. If you can't beat the Cowboys and you can't beat the Chicago Bears, how are you going to beat arguably the best team in the league on the road? Unless they're making big changes to this defense and it just magically starts working, or if Marucs Mariota just balls the fuck out and beats Mahomes in a shootout in his building, I just don't know how the Commanders come away with the win this week. And frankly, I think the same thing right now heading into Week 9 versus Seattle. Even though you're home in that game, Sam Darnold is balling out. Who's going to guard Jackson Smith and Jigba in this Commanders secondary? I mean, the answer to that question should be Trey Amos. But even he, man, he's a rookie going up against maybe the best route runner in the league right now. He's been balling out. So, I don't know, man. This Commanders team seems super, super dedicated to Bobby Wagner and Marshawn Lattimore. And I don't get it. I don't get it.
To Amos's credit, I don't think we called his name a lot against the Cowboys. I don't recall calling his name a lot.
Well, Amos has been great all year.
Yeah, and so I think
he's been by far the best player in the secondary.
But my question is with everyone else. And I think unless the Commanders are full, okay, we're going to get youth movement. Jordan McGee is in. Even though we might have some communication issues, let's put some green dot on someone else. I don't know who that person is. Maybe Frankie Louvu is there. He's the one probably the longest in the linebacker core. But even if we're going to put him at edge, I don't know. It's just going to be one of those situations where it's like, on defense, I genuinely don't know what you do because you have this huge Bobby Wagner hole. And you're going to have to put the green dot on someone if you bench him, and I don't know who that is.
If you bench Wagner?
Yeah.
So McGee, and then probably Ali Cahoe.
Yeah, Ali Cahoe, but both of those guys are more young.
I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
I want to see if these young guys can play.
It's more
because
so,
Bobby Wagner, I'm sorry, he's done. He's done, all right? He's a very smart football player, very physical, very strong. All those things are true. He also can't run, all right? And if you can't run as an off-ball linebacker, your defense is going to get absolutely gashed, especially on the perimeter, all right? If you go out in zone coverage, he can't backpedal. He can't change directions. All right, so, he's going to get manipulated so bad, and we've seen that all year long. If you play him in man, he can't run with running backs, and he can't even run with tight ends. So what are we doing putting him in man coverage? They're just going to throw it to whoever he's guarding every single time. Just look at the Bijan game in Atlanta when they put, for some reason, Bobby on Bijan. Look at Tucker Kraft in the Green Bay game. It makes no sense, and I get it, man. And what sucks about this Ponzi when it comes to Bobby Wagner, who's a great guy, by the way. All right, he's a great guy, great leader. I have nothing against him as a person. We're just talking about football here. All right. The thing that sucks is that he's your green dot, and he is the hub of communication for your defense.
That's exactly
so
what I'm saying.
that's why it's tough to not play him. But it's also hard to play him because he's a liability in both phases, and good offensive coordinators are going to exploit that weakness in this team time and time again. So, listen, man, I get that changing your green dot midseason is probably going to create some problems, okay? But I would rather get somebody up to speed for the rest of this season, learning how to be a good green dot and a good communicator. And by the way, I would keep Wagner on the roster to, help that person along. Whether it's a safety like Quan Martin, whether it's a linebacker like Jordan McGee. Hell, give it to fucking Frankie Louvu for all I care. All right? I got to find something for the future when it comes to your green dot. Because Bobby Wagner, this is his last year in the National Football League. And it should be his last year in Washington at least, okay? And like I said, that has nothing to do with Bobby Wagner as a person. I think he's a great locker room guy, great leader, a great communicator, highly intelligent. All those things have been true about him that his entire career, and they're still applied today. But he can't move anymore, guys. And he can't. And if you have linebackers that can't move in this league, you will get fucked up the ass on defense. And that is what the Commanders have been all season long. Frankly, against the only teams that the Commanders' defense has actually held firm on have been teams with either A, a lot of injuries, or
Chargers.
B, completely incompetent teams.
Raiders.
Russell Wilson Giants, the Raiders, all right? And then the Chargers had a bunch of injuries on the offensive line, and, frankly, they still moved the ball quite a bit against the Washington Commanders.
If it wasn't for some timely turnovers there, I think, the Chargers probably would have been more in that game, and they shot themselves in the foot a lot in that game. And my whole thing with Bobby Wagner, and it's like I said, it's a Bobby Wagner conundrum, because if you take him out the field, you're going to have those communication issues. But if you keep him on the field, it's going to be one of those things where he is the weak link. He is the weak link. Everyone's going to target him. They're going to get schemes to make sure that he is involved in their play, making sure that he's getting cooked. Offensive coordinators have done it all season.
The thing about defensive football in this league that I want you guys to understand is that you are as strong as your weakest link, all right? And if your weakest link is somebody that is an off-ball linebacker that can't move, they're going to exploit it, and they're going to continue to pick on him as they have all season. And it's not just him, okay? We don't just have one geriatric old guy that can't move.
Got two.
They have two in Marshawn Lattimore.
Arguably, at your two most important positions, do you have guys who are beyond cooked?
And then when
middle linebacker, and then CB1.
Yes, and then you add on top of that some young guys on this defense that have just been terrible. Mike Sainristil in the slot, I can't believe it. I thought he was going to be the best slot corner in that draft class, has been terrible in the nickel spot. All right? And then Quan Martin, who showed some great growth last year. He wasn't a phenomenal player, but he was certainly good enough at free safety. Took a big step forward in year 2 from year 1. Now he's fully regressed back to year 1. Terrible Quan Martin this year. And then, of course, Will Harris gets injured and Dietrich Wise gets injured and now Dorrance Armstrong is injured, and it's just been a downward spiral of massive proportions this year. And unless the Commanders make some big changes, it's not going to get better. All right, if they keep going out there with Bobby Wagner, if they keep going out there with Marshawn Lattimore, and they make 0 changes to the personnel, I literally don't think there's anything they can do from a schematic standpoint that can get them to play good football against good offenses. Like maybe you go up against a Raiders team or a Giants team with Russell Wilson at quarterback, and they're just completely incompetent, and you catch a break. Maybe that happens against bad football teams. But against the Chiefs, against Seattle, against Detroit, these teams we're playing the next 3 weeks, teams that have buttoned up offenses, like they're going to find ways to kill you, all right? They're going to find your weaknesses, and they are going to exploit them time and time and time again. So really the only thing that I can see being a legitimate possibility as something that could make this team better is to get the old guys out, shift some things around, and try something new. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to keep banging their head against the wall, and they're going to be insane, the literal definition of insanity, and keep trying doing the same things over and over and expecting different results. But, you know, that's just, I think, where we're at right now. They're loyal to Bobby Wagner. They're loyal to Marshawn Lattimore because they're older guys, veterans that they have a lot of respect for and have, quote-unquote, earned their keep in this league. But, like, I just think, you know, just going over line by line here in this defense, Ponzi, the starting defensive line should be this. Jacob Martin at edge, then Javon Kinlaw, Deron Payne on the interior, and then it should be Frankie Louvu at the other defensive end position. Von Miller is your rotational edge rusher. Okay, that should be the defensive line rotation.
Solid.
And that's okay. Like we can work with that. Then we get into inside linebackers. I would bench Bobby Wagner, and I would play Jordan McGee, who played, by the way, when he got time to play against the Cowboys, he looked as good as any linebacker the Commanders have had all season long. He was making good tackles out in space. He's been a hell of a blitzer this year. He's been their best guy out in pass coverage this year. I don't understand why they don't play Jordan McGee more. He should be your number 1 inside linebacker. And then between Kay Madrano and Ali Cahoe, I would give Cahoe the first shot at it. Okay, and you can rotate Madrano in, see which one of those guys plays better. But for sure, Jordan McGee, and then one of the UCLA boys should be the other off-ball linebacker. Then in the secondary, you have to bench Marshawn Lattimore, okay? Get him off the field. And then you've got Trey Amos as your number 1 corner. You've got Mike Sainristil as your other starting outside corner because he clearly can't play nickel. And then I would play either Jonathan Jones or Noah Igbenogany in the slot, whichever one you think could do a better job there. And then at free safety, I would put Percy Butler in for Quan Martin. Quan Martin's unplayable right now, all right? I get he was a high draft pick a couple years ago. Don't care. He's been terrible. Put Percy Butler in. And then at strong safety, you got to play Darnell Savage. All right, that's the lineup that gives this team the best possible shot at success, period, okay? And I don't think they're going to go to that lineup. I think they're probably going to put Jacob Martin and probably Von Miller out there at that defensive end. I think they're going to continue to put Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner as their 2 starting off-ball linebackers. I think they're going to continue to play Marshawn Lattimore on the outside, and I think they're going to continue to play Quan Martin. There's a lot of things that you can do to try and make this defense better. I just don't think they're going to do it, and I think Mahomes and the Chiefs with Rashee Rice and Tyquan Thornton and Hollywood Brown and Travis Kelce and all these guys that they got at receiver now are just going to absolutely kill this Commanders defense, and I really hope it doesn't happen, but if I have to make a prediction, I'm going to predict that the Kansas City Chiefs embarrass us in front of a national stage.
It really sucks because one of these things that I always believe in terms of scheme and having personnel is that if you have guys that are not performing who have been in the league for a while and probably lost a step, start your younger guys.
Yeah.
Because
see what these guys can do.
And not only that, is that you already have the older players making mistakes.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They don't have the step. They don't have the athletic ability to go make those plays. These younger guys have more legs with them. Maybe they don't know everything that's going on, but they can still rely on their instincts and what they're being coached up to do to make those plays at least. Instead of having guys who can't make those plays, you have the chance to make plays defensively on, have that athletic ability to keep up with a Kyle Pitts, with a Bijan Robinson. It sucks because it's one of those things where Dan Quinn's going to rely on his guys, and I don't think he should be dying on this pedestal. When Dan Quinn was in Dallas, he also had those players where you're wondering, why did he start them? So, it's one of those things where Dan Quinn has his guys, he likes his people, but, enough's enough, man.
Enough's enough. We got to make some changes. If you've been watching this Commanders defense all year and you think that they should stick with the same personnel that they've been having, I don't even know what to say to you, man. And now that Dorrance Armstrong is out, your most impactful defensive player, that's only going to make the problem worse. All right. So, got to make some changes. We do have a super chat here that we'll get to here before we head out. It's from Light with a $2. We appreciate you, Light. It says, if we have a top 15 pick, we should trade down. I agree. I think if you don't, obviously it depends on who's available and, what your needs are going into the draft, all that stuff. But like I've been saying on this show for the last week, guys, I want to embrace a youth movement in the years to come. All right, maybe you take a step back next year, but then that allows you to take 2 steps forward the following year, and we can get back to competing for Super Bowls with Jayden Daniels as your franchise quarterback. It's just this year, coming off an NFC Championship run, they want to invest in veterans. They go get Laramie Tunsil. They go and get Deebo Samuel. They bring back Marshawn Lattimore, all these guys. And right now, you just have a lot of players on this team that are old and slow, and I want to get young and fast. I want to be able to play fast on both sides of the ball. And the way you get faster is you get younger players. That's just the reality of the situation. Younger players are faster. They have more legs with them. Obviously younger players are more athletic, and in a league as competitive as the National Football League, athleticism comes at a premium. Especially on the defensive side of the ball. So so if you can get an additional draft pick or 2 by trading down from 15, there's going to be a lot of teams trying to hunt quarterbacks in that spot now. If there's 4 or 5 starting quarterbacks, first round guys that are going to be there's going to be some teams that are going to be trying to poach a pick there at number 15 that you could probably get pretty decent draft pick in return for.
And I think, I haven't scouted, obviously fully in depth as we've been into this NFL season. But a lot of the guys that I've noticed that have been kind of shooting up that I like are more defensive side of the ball. I think it's a very good defensive class. I think that having those more picks, those top 100 picks, and a guy and trading to a team that's going to be quarterback heavy, that's going to want to move up, maybe potentially offer you multiple top 100 picks, a first, second, or third. That's a gold mine for the Commanders because they need a youth infusion.
Yes, 100%.
And, I think
and you don't have a second-round pick next year.
Exactly.
So if you can get a second-round pick next year by trading down and you still get another good player in round 1, that's something I'm interested in, man. I'm interested in trading down in round 1 next year. I really am. I think the Commanders are probably the number one, out of all the teams that could trade down in the draft next year, the Commanders might be number 1 because they need young players and they don't have a lot of draft picks. So what does that tell me? First-round trade down. All day long,
and
all right?
Even if you have a top 10 pick, which could certainly happen, one team could overpay. We looked at it a couple years back whenever the Bears tried to decide with Justin Fields, and they traded that haul to the Panthers, or they got that haul from the Panthers. Mm-hmm. Having a haul like that could change your franchise.
Yeah, it could. So we'll see what happens, man. We'll be live on Monday, guys. Not Monday. Monday. We'll be live on Monday for Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, right.
This week. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. We'll be going live about an hour before we kick things off in Kansas City on Monday night. So if you guys want to join our live watch party, it's going to be a lot of fun. An hour of pregame coverage followed by live play-by-play and live analysis of the game, followed by extensive postgame coverage. So we'll see if the Commanders can actually, step up and play better this week. We'll have our preview come out later this week as well to get you guys ready for this week's matchup. But until next time, guys, this has been the Commanders Report live show from me and Ponzi. We'll see you guys on Monday for Monday Night Football. And until then, guys, hail to the Commanders.